How awesome does that look? That's amazing. Okay, we've got our two guests. We're going to bring them out now. First, the Elven King, Thranduil. Let's welcome Lee Pace. And our other guest, the King Under the Mountain, Thorin Oakenshield, is here. Richard Armitage. So something I've always wanted to ask actors that appear in these movies, these massive epic Peter Jackson movies. When you get a role like this, like, what's the first thing you do? Do you flip out? Do you read? Did you read The Hobbit? Had you already read The Hobbit?
Yeah, the first thing I did was read the book again. Yeah, because I'd read it when I was a kid, but then I guess I read it when I was preparing to meet them and audition for it the first time. Watched Lord of the Rings again. Watch the extended edition, watch the, all the other stuff, because it's not just about The Hobbit, it's about this whole world that Peter Jackson has created, this Middle Earth, which is uniquely him, in many ways.
And the idea of him making a second trilogy with this Hobbit trilogy, there must have been some pressure to make it as good as the first one. Is that going through your head?
Yeah, I mean, I remember when the first trilogy was being made, I'd gone to my agent and said, please can I audition for this? And he said, well, what would you audition for? And I was really interested in playing Legolas. And yeah, that was his response. He laughed me out of the room. So I was really disappointed, that I was very late to the table. So to get the chance to come and be in this, revisit to Middle-earth was a bit of a legacy, a bit of a dream come true for me.
Both of your characters in this final installment, they undergo some pretty profound emotional changes. It's almost like you seal the story away a little bit from Bilbo, and I wanted to talk to you both about that. Well, why don't we start with you, Richard, with Thorin? Again, not to spoil anything for anyone, but Thorin becomes obsessed a little with greed. How does Peter help you with the emotional arc, like something like that?
I mean, it's sort of built into their screenplay, and it's there from the very first prologue of the first movie that there is this susceptibility to dragon sickness that he witnessed his grandfather going through. So as he's approaching the mountain on this very linear quest, it's always looming in the distance. So you can feel the black clouds of that kind of insanity gathering, and then you see him descend into his own mind and into the mountain in the third film. So, the guidance came from Peter and Fran and Philippa, and just gauging, how mad we make him, how quickly, was something that changed throughout the course of filming.
Thorin's really strong, but I feel like in this film especially, we get to see the vulnerable side of the character. It's something that, are there things about Thorin that we don't really know?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we kind of looked at together as actor and filmmaker is making the character as inconsistent as possible. Normally you look for consistency in character, so we tried to make him surprising and unexpected, and part of that was giving him a vulnerability. But of course, as he approaches the end of his story, let's call it, where the only thing he can do is speak the truth. That's the ultimate opening up, isn't it? Absolutely.
I feel like we should play a clip. Do we have a nice clip on that?
It's not that scene, is it?
I don't.
Please tell
me
it's not that scene.
No. But there is a nice clip.
Is that a wig you're wearing there?
No, that's your real hair, right? Yeah. Actually, it's a good enough transition. Let's talk about that, Lee. I feel like your character also goes through some deep emotional changes, especially regarding battlefield sacrifice and some of the finer points of love. Is that?
Well, I mean, the character as written in the book is, he's never called Thranduil. It's you understand, a few of the actions that he makes throughout the book and are in the movie. But this movie was never based on the book that was published in 1937. It's based on everything that Tolkien then learned about Middle-earth, about the elves, about these characters as he wrote Lord of the Rings and the appendixes, and well into he developed this world over many, many years. So that's the story that we're telling now, and we've learned so much about Thranduil in that time, and we try to put all that into this story and add a little, a bit of our own creativity to it as well. When he's an isolationist, he's tough. He's very old and grumpy. He doesn't want to get involved in a fight. But when the dragon dies, which is not a spoiler because,
These people know that.
Come on. All eyes are on that mountain and what's going to happen, with this immense treasure that is, lying vulnerable there, and what's going to happen next. And it feels like the machinery of war is coming into place and no one can stop it, So, yeah, that's a painful thing.
Oh, I can imagine. And it's when you're working on a project like this or any of these 3 Hobbit movies, I imagine a lot of the acting is to special effects that haven't been created yet. But one of the great things about this trilogy is just how there's such a wonderful emotional through line through all of them. And I think that really does come from the acting and the actors. I'm wondering just if you could give us some insight on set how Peter foregrounds the emotion and the acting, like your through lines.
It's one of the things that I've loved about working with Peter is that he's as interested in actors as he is with technology. And he says himself that he doesn't lie in bed dreaming up new ways to kind of create visual effects. It's always driven by the action and the actors. And people always ask you, is it really difficult acting on a green screen? The reality is that you're the only living, breathing thing in that green box. So you get all of his attention. And for the time that you work with him, which is actually relatively short compared to the post-production period, you get so much of Pete. You get his heart and his soul in the writing and, face to face. And he's a great actor, so you see little bits of your character reflected back at you, which I really enjoyed.
It's an active imagination, and it always was. Whether it was a set that's built or, if you deliver the performance and then the set is built after the fact. It's all part of the imagination. When we had our first scene together in Desolation of Smaug, we were in different rooms. Because there was, he'd built this incredible thing where we could, for the size difference, we could act at the same time and listen to each other, but on completely different sets. And I still felt like there was, the reality of
Thank
the moment
God.
there.
Richard, I've heard you describe yourself as an actor that really immerses yourself into the role and even close to method acting. And I wonder how that applies on something like this.
I've never described myself like that. I immerse myself into a bath at the end of the day, but that's about it. I think everybody does in different ways. I just, with this particular role, playing one character over 3 movies, it was 2 at the time, but whatever, it's a long period of time, in a very kind of heavy, hot, uncomfortable costume. For me, it was about concentration and just not letting that be a crippling factor. So when you see me in between takes facing the wall in a corner because I don't want to be disturbed, it's just about, keeping your head in the right place. That's all. There's no kind of weird trickery to it.
Mm-hmm. And you're, Lee, you're no stranger to long-term projects either. I'm thinking about The Fall as well, which is yes, let's applaud The Fall. Yes. But I imagine that maintaining that kind of concentration perhaps over time, over months, and out of chronology is difficult.
Well, it's all about trying to get away from yourself. That's the more I do this, the more I kind of find that's the goal, and it's very hard to do. To get your own thoughts out of your head and the character's thoughts into your head, and there's so many different ways you can go about. It's wrong to use the word trick yourself to do that, but you have to put yourself in a position that's beneficial to that kind of work. And with a character like this, I look so different that. I look at myself in the mirror and I behave differently. People treat me differently when I walk onto set. And that's very useful. But it's all, the mask absolutely helps to just separate yourself from who you really are, because Lee Pace is pretty boring.
So you say.
But the Elven King is a fascinating, complicated, wild creature. And I've got to scrub as much of me out of, my mind for that moment as I can.
Do we have another clip? I know we have one more. I imagine that when you play these parts, so much of it starts with the voice. I mean, you guys, you're doing it, and in your case, maybe even learning a new language or lines in a different language. How much of your acting background applies when you take on a fantasy role like this? I mean, does it start there?
I remember being ridiculed about my obsession with the voice, Lee Pace.
Like how? Please, come on, let's have some details.
I kind of do. I do take that side of it quite seriously because there was a long period of time again to kind of be consistent with the voice, and it started for me because I was trying to age the character a bit. I felt like I was too young to play the character, so I dropped his voice by about 2 semitones, and I had to do a fair amount of work to make that happen. And your voice finds its way back to where it wants to be. It was quite tricky in ADR post-production coming back and not being able to do the voice again. So I had to do lots of screaming and shouting to sort of break my voice a bit. But I just wanted him to sound like the kind of character that could command an army over a battlefield. It's a specific sound that I was looking for, that's all.
Like a ravaged, ruined kind of voice. I get it.
I wasn't ridiculing you. That's what elves and dwarves do.
They fight. I imagine this taking roles like this isn't like taking a role in any movie. These movies are huge events, and it must have changed your lives in some way. I mean, how has being in The Hobbit made things different for you guys?
Well, I mean, I'll say I was shocked when Peter Jackson cast me. I really wanted to do it. I wanted to be a part of it. But when I actually got the call that he wanted me to be a part of it, I was like, oh wow, okay. So now that we've come on the other side of it, and it has been a tremendous amount of work, and very creative work, and I feel good about the work. I know that he feels good about the work. Yeah, I definitely feel kind of a confidence in that creative process. Do you know what I mean? Like you can, we can all get together. I mean, most of this movie we made around Philippa Boyan's kitchen table, like discussing the characters, discussing, what the stakes are of the scene, discussing things that we like about the story. All these,
Sounds very intimate.
Yeah, we were friends at this point, and that's been a very, big growing process for me. I mean, it's been 4 years I've been working on this, knowing them.
Are you sad that it's over?
It's not quite over until the extended edition DVD release.
That's right. Yes.
And boy, that is going to be a long movie.
Yes.
Yeah, one of the things that in answer to your question, that has changed for me is just an understanding of the global reach of this story. And it's not just the film, it's the fact that this book has been translated into so many languages because it translates culturally. And that, to me, is really exciting because even if you don't really see it in its original format, language-wise, you can still get something from it. And I think war and the understanding of it and the sense of leaving home and going home translates into any culture. And that, to me, is really exciting.
It does feel universal, and it has that appeal. I know that we have some time for a few questions from the audience. I've also got some questions from Twitter that are coming in. Let's keep the questions just to this film, please, or the trilogy.
Hi. Of all 3 movies, which scene was the most emotional scene for you to film, and why? If you can tell us.
I can definitely answer that one. It's the one scene that we probably can't talk about because it will spoil the story. But it's the scene that you know is coming the minute you are offered the job, and it's the scene that you read in the book. The words were very, very close to Tolkien, and when playing it, there was no acting. It just felt like speaking the truth and 2 actors connecting. So yeah, I was definitely in.
Here's another question. He doesn't want to say.
It's the last scene with Legolas. You'll see. You'll see.
Right. It's a great scene. I know the one. This is one from Twitter user CloutJetLoop. He asks, "Did you guys take a prop home with you as a souvenir?"
I'm curious to know why that question is the most asked question about
Everyone
this.
wants
What
to
is
know.
it?
Do you have a sword? Do you have something?
Yeah, I took my sword home, and I took a set of my ears home, and I folded
Probably
them
had
in
a
a
lot of
copy of
those,
the. Yeah, every day you get a new set of ears, and on the last day I kept the ears, and I folded them in my copy of The Hobbit, and kind of put them on the shelf. So one day I'll open it up, and they'll be like disgusting.
Didn't take anything back.
I was offered the hands and flatly refused. They're the most ugly thing I've ever seen, and they were the bane of my life. Try going to the bathroom with a pair of big prosthetic hands on. It's the most disappointing thing in life.
Nice. Let's have a third question.
Hi, I'm excited for this movie. Actually, really, really, really excited. Big Hobbit fan. How did the filmmakers go about animating Smaug, the dragon?
Well, I mean, that's really a question for Peter, not me. But I do remember when I was in New Zealand for the first time, and I was like looking for, I was like, what's the dragon going to be? Like, what's it going to be? What's it going to look like? And he was like, it's going to be big. And I said, like, it's going to be big. And he's like, it's going to be really, really big. But I love how much the dragon actually resembles Tolkien's picture of the dragon. The drawing on the book. I don't know how they did it.
If I say the word Benedict Cumberbatch, I was really lucky because there was a moment in the third film where they wanted me to sort of replicate Smaug a little bit in one scene. So Benedict was down in New Zealand voicing him, and so I went in to watch and to do some dialogue opposite him, and they were filming him because he was physicalizing on all fours. He was kind of creating this body to go with the voice, and it was so fascinating because I don't even know if it's made it into the animation, but all the animators were there and they watched him. So I think that's one of the reasons why the dragon's also successful.
It's really based on his physicality. This is a really neat question from a Twitter feed actually. This is from a Twitter user named Matthias Vatmatias. Outside of the filming itself, what was the most memorable thing that you guys did in New Zealand or took away from New Zealand?
I went on a couple really great hikes. I mean, if you get the chance to go to New Zealand, jump at it because it is an awesome, extraordinary place. I hiked around the Tongariro Northern Circuit, which is kind of up near where they filmed Mount Doom. And it was about a 3-day hike all the way around it. I did another 3-day hike around a place called Lake Waikia-Moana, which is pretty fun. You kind of camped along the way, yeah.
I set myself a challenge to try and ski down every slope that New Zealand had to offer, and I think I managed it, actually. I remember going back early before the second block, 2 weeks early, to ski on my birthday, so I did. That was my thing.
It's such a beautiful place. It's hard to believe it's not a fantasy itself. Let's have another question from the crowd.
Oh, hi Lee, hi Richard. I was wondering, was there something about both of your characters that made you really want the role, to have it, to play it?
That is a really good question. Well, I remember Philippa Boyens got on the phone with me when they were kind of like, we think you'd be really right for this part, and we'd like to meet with you and talk to you about it. And she got on the phone with me. I remember being up in the country, walking around the woods, and kind of her explaining to me how she saw the Elven King, that he's very old, that he's isolated from these wars, that he's, and we just kind of started batting around who the character could be. Because like I said in the book, it's not, very well defined. The book is this big, the movie's that big. You know what I mean? So we had a lot of work to do, and that's what really excited me about it, is filling in those gaps and letting it be a creative, creation with it. The book, remember that cartoon? The cartoon of The Hobbit that's made? Very different Elven Kings.
Yeah, I mean, the scene actually that they gave me to read for the audition, sometimes they create scenes just for audition purposes, which I thought this scene was, and it's the scene in the first movie where Balin and Thorin talk in the corridor about, the quest, and I assumed it wouldn't be in the film, but they liked it so much that they, kept it in. But that scene for me really encompassed everything about the character, and it's unusual to find all the seeds of the character in one scene. So that was, the audition scene was the reason I wanted to play him.
Here's another question from Twitter. Emily Lowther asks, actually, this is a two-part question. First, what was your last day on set like? I can imagine, especially after 4 years, just the emotion of being in Middle Earth, maybe for that last moment. How would that feel? And also, have you guys seen the movie yet?
Yeah, I've seen it 4 times. I saw it on IMAX when I was in Toronto, and it is the only way to see it. It is extraordinary on IMAX to see how, the big scope of the movie. You get part 1.
Okay. What was part 1? What was your last day? I think it feels like it's the bane of my life that I always am the last man standing on every job I've ever done. There's always water, and everyone's gone home. They all kind of get wrapped out, and I was still fighting the final fight with Thorin and Azog. And my last scene was a scene in the story where Thorin has to make a decision about how his story will end. I knew that it was my last shot because people gather, and Fran came to set and Philippa came to set, and it was a very emotional moment. I'll never forget it.
Hi, my name is Shay. My question is for both Lee and Richard. Can you describe your choice and how difficult it was to take either your own take as actors on these characters, or did you pull it directly from the novel and try to stay true to Tolkien's image?
Well, the book is a different thing than the movie. They're just different. They're different things. The experience of reading the book is, one author's writing going into your mind and your imagination and his imagination, having a very private conversation. This movie is a very collaborative experience. I mean, it's not just me making the character, but, the costume designer, Peter King, who did the makeup and hair, all of the CGI creators who kind of not only create my elven halls, but create the Battle of Five Armies. So, and then Peter Jackson, and it's a collaborative thing making a movie, and it is creative, and Tolkien is one of the creators in that, process, and a very powerful one, a very potent voice in that discussion, the most potent voice in the discussion, but it is a collaboration.
Yeah, I feel like my imagination has perhaps been created by a writer like Tolkien, because I read him so avidly as a kid. I was 7 when I first read the book. And actually, when I was cast, it's one of the first roles where I felt like I'm not right for this part. And I went to New Zealand really thinking I've got to shift so far to get to the character. But the one thing that I did have was the book and my first impressions of the character. So I would always try and go back to the book, despite how wrong I felt that I was. I'd always think, well, Pete's entrusted me with the role. I've got my interpretation of the character, and they've got to meet somewhere in the middle, and that's the experiment that we go on.
Is there ever any room for improvisation with it?
Oh yeah, the whole thing. I mean, there's so much kind of experimentation. I mean, the scene in the final film where Thorin's kind of going through this change with the gold, that whole scene was just one stage direction that said Thorin sees his reflection and realizes what he's become, and Pete said, I don't know what to do with this. So that whole thing was a very abstract experiment.
But I'm sorry. I thought I had something to add, but I didn't. But a large part of what we do is, Pete is such a fan of these stories and a fan of these movies and a fan of the fans. I'm a fan of these, the movies, a fan of Pete's, a fan of the fans. So much of what I'm doing is trying to make Pete laugh or make Pete kind of be like, oh, that's cool. That's the Elven King. I don't want to put it in the movie. So there is a certain amount of just kind of trying things, hoping that it will, make Pete go, cool. I like it.
Definitely works. Definitely makes us do that. Let's thank both our guests for coming tonight. The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies opens on Wednesday, 17th. Go check it out.
Thank you.